Thank you, Kurt, for the introduction. Good evening, Ambassador Haspels and esteemed members of Congress, and to the members of the Nederland American Foundation. Thank you for your invitation tonight to speak at this keynote address. I'm joined by my wife, Agnes, and our daughter, Stephanie, and Stephanie's husband, Billy Causey. I have been working at NASA for 30 years now, and I've been thinking of how to summarize this time into a 15-minute talk. And the thought occurs to me that my work goes in cycles. These cycles can be characterized by the title of our talk, which is to build the project, launch the hardware, and fly the mission. I come from the Caribbean island of Aruba. My grandfather first arrived there while working on a Lago Exxon tanker, and that's where he decided to establish a family. You see me here at the start of my build days when I was as a young boy in the lab of my parents, where I taught myself some electronics and did some tinkering, and I owe a lot of where I am today to those early years of learning on my own. That learning, that education continued in the United States. And you see me here for my doctoral research at the Yale University. The subject of my thesis was robotic arms, and in particular you see the one here. It was equipped with a skin that I developed. It covers the surface of the arm with 500 individual sensors and allows this arm to operate in an unknown environment with humans present, with moving factory items, things like that. That kind of work was seen by NASA as being potentially very useful for space station, and so that work led me to the Gala Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, not very far from here. And that's where my build days really kicked into high gear, building hardware for space. Now, when we do this work, we are covered from head to toe with a clean room suit with only our eyes exposed, and that allows us to keep the hardware clean so that we don't compromise its operation. Now, this slide needs a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of background. I built 5 missions worth of hardware for the Hubble Space Telescope, and they will be installed by the astronaut crew. And on one such cycle, we had to add a circuit breaker on the outside of Hubble, and I knew that the astronauts would be installing it. And since I was leading the team, I decided to call this project the Aruba, and this is the Aruba box that now still sits on the outside of Hubble. Here it is being tested in this little white spacesuit. You will see more about this later in the talk. And then with this hardware, we fly it to the launch site with my private jet. Well, no, of course, this is not my private jet, but with this high value hardware, we often charter custom transportation, such as this jet. And sometimes we even stuff 2 of our big mechanical engineers in the back so that we make sure our hardware is well protected from any bumps during the flight. Our launch site is in the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we refurbish a lot of the components of the space shuttle and the rockets, such as this main engine that you see here, which is strong enough to hold my weight. And on the way to work, sometimes I pick up little toys along the road to play with. Of course, this is just a trick shot. It is us transporting the shuttle along the road to process it, to prepare it for launch. And you see it here on the launch pad, ready to go. Of course, the shuttle is now retired, but it certainly was a welcome sight in the days of when the shuttle did fly. This is me about to enter the crew compartment where the hatch is, and me sitting in the commander's chair of the space shuttle. Nowadays, the shuttle has been retired, as I said, and so we tend to contract other companies to ferry our hardware to space, such as Elon Musk's SpaceX. Elon and I are close friends based on all the personal messages he sends me. I'm not too sure. I think maybe he sends it to a lot of people, but I'd like to think I'm a pretty exclusive club. Here we're sitting in front of the rocket, the booster that was returned from space and now sits in the Hawthorne, California factory. And here I am inside one of the SpaceX clean rooms at work. You can see next to me is the Dragon capsule up here, and down below is what they call the trunk, where our hardware resides for when it goes into space. And in this next image, you see me here at the launch pad with the flag of Aruba and the capsule sitting on top. Since it's been a while since some of you have seen a shuttle launch, I thought I'd include that here. It's a beautiful sight. We start by spraying water near the engines. We then ignite the three main engines. First, they then let run for a few seconds, make sure they're on the full power. Then light the two solid rocket boosters, and the shuttle moves on. And here we are in space. One of my favorite pictures of the shuttle project. We see the bright Earth at the top of the image, the dark sky, this dark space in the background. In the midground, you see the Space Shuttle Columbia, which no longer exists, unfortunately. This was its last fully successful mission that you see here. And then, of course, on the side here in the foreground, we see the Hubble has been fastened in the cargo bay by the robot arm. And right here, you see the Aruba box on the side of the Hubble in place. And here it is again. From another point of view, you see the Aruba box sitting on this large radiator. So I take you back to 2002 when we installed the Aruba into space.
I'm tethered to the day one cap on the Aruba box.
And when astronaut John Grunsfeld installed the Aruba box, he mentioned the name of the island twice in space.
So far on the Aruba box.
And this caused the name of our island to reverberate around the Deep Space Network, which is something I'm super proud of, and many in Aruba are very happy about also. So in addition to building hardware and having it be launched on other vehicles such as the shuttle and SpaceX rockets, I also had the chance to personally fly in zero gravity myself. And this, you see a picture of us doing our Top Gun pose, very serious look, and three of us, the flight team. And in the background, you see the aircraft that we used. The aircraft makes these very high arcs in the atmosphere, around 40,000 feet up high, and does these arcing dives, which causes the contents of the aircraft to experience zero gravity for about half a minute. And it was on one such flight that I took the flag of Aruba to float freely in the cabin. It is something I use, a video I use every year when we celebrate our national identity in March. That day we celebrate our national anthem and our national symbol, the flag. And you see the flag floating freely from gravity. It symbolizes our democratic freedom that we have in Aruba, and we enjoy it being part of the Dutch Kingdom. And this video is very which I enjoy doing along with the Aruba box. I often will go to a school a day when I'm at home in Aruba and visit the classrooms to stimulate interest in education. This activity must have been appreciated apparently because I was awarded a knighthood by Queen Beatrix. I was inducted into the Nederlandse Leeuw, the Order of the Nederlandse Leeuw, something quite rare. I believe I'm only the first or second person from Aruba to have been inducted in this order. And as you can imagine, my family members, of which you see my mom here, are very honored to have this opportunity. So what does the future hold? Well, I'm working several projects these days, and the first one I want to highlight is a weather satellite, and actually it's a weather constellation of 5 weather satellites. We need to constantly ensure that we have a good these satellites take many years to build, so we need to make sure we have a constant flow of them to continuously keep our presence in space so we can observe our weather. So weather and climate change are a big effect on a small island like Aruba. So I decided to contribute to this effort for the next few years. Here you see JPSS-2, which is the middle one in the constellation being built. It will be launched later this year. The second project I want to highlight that I'm working on is a very exciting robotic mission called OSAM-1. We used to, of course, fly up with a shuttle and a human crew to fix other vehicles such as the Hubble and Solar Max and others. Now, since the shuttle has been retired, we want to continue this legacy, but instead with a robotic vehicle. And that's what you see here. The bottom part is OSAM-1. It has its robot arm and is flown up to this vehicle here, which we can then repair or refuel or reposition. A lot of services we can present, and that's will be launched in 2026 in the coming years, and will be promised to be a very exciting mission. The next mission that I want to highlight that I'm working on is called Roman Space Telescope. It will be the follow-on to the famed Hubble, and it coincidentally, my daughter Stephanie, who's also in the room, is also working on this. Let me highlight a little bit about what she is doing. In almost all digital cameras, from the small one on your phone to the biggest one formed by this large space telescope, use a chip to take the light gathered from the thing you're looking at into a electrical signal, into a file, into a stream of images. Well, the one for Roman Space Telescope is shown here. It is an array of 18 imagers, each of them 4K by 4K or 16 megapixel, and combined they add up to a total of almost 300 megapixel. This is the imager for Roman Space Telescope will be. It's unprecedentedly large and high resolution. And it turns out that my daughter is the one building this device, a very important and weighty responsibility. So yes, she's actually building the imager that will be used on the next big flagship of our scientific community. And this imager is so important that it is on the actual logo of the mission. So this is the logo of the mission, and 2/3 of the logo is occupied by a representation of the imager. So my work is nowhere near as glamorous on Roman. I am building the calibration system. And you could say that by highlighting her efforts tonight, that I'm shining a light on her work, metaphorically. But it turns out that it's also literally the case. My calibration system once we are installed in space, will shine a little bit of light on this detector, her work, every month in order to calibrate the detector. So I'm also going to be shining a light on her work, literally, in space. And finally, I'm going to the moon. Well, let me explain. As you may know, NASA is going back to the moon, and I have been serving as advisor on this mission called Astrobotics Peregrine Mission 1. And along with the scientific payload, we are able to send along personal memento. And I've decided to participate in this by sending locks of hair of my family members and myself, and also to include Aruba, a small sample of the beach sand from the well-known sugar white beaches. So that when this launches later this year, I will be able to look up at the moon, and always the same side of the moon is facing us. I can look up at the moon and see the spot where part of me is on the moon forever. And so can anyone in Aruba look up and say, yes, part of Aruba is on the moon. So the first image I showed you was of the Carina Nebula, and I want to leave you where I found you, in space, with a time-lapse taken from the International Space Station. You see, for example, the northern lights here glowing at night. This is the business end of the rover arm. You also see thunderstorm popping up bright white light, and of course the glow of the cities below. This is, you also see the solar rays spinning and tracking the sun as we're going around it. Each orbit of the space station takes about an hour and a half around the globe. So you experience basically about 16 sunrises every day. Every 24-hour period, you see the sunrise 16 times on the International Space Station. And these are the Soyuz capsules that we used to use exclusively in our SpaceX vehicles. Some more northern lights. Thank you for listening.